In a near-death experience, it's essentially just like taking off a heavy coat. And consciousness goes, my experience anyway, was very much yummy, warm, kind of honey, pink-like energy with fractals and mandalas, overwhelming love and nurturing. And I remember floating in this kind of love bubble.
So you talked about getting a higher perspective and then choosing to come back. And then after coming here, you realize that the mess is still there, and then you had to take accountability. What is it, that one thing that if you were to share with our audience, that the decision to come back?
Experiences. So in those, I was shown the pre-birth contracts, how it all plays out together. And it's funny because we're all down for it before we come in, and then we forget. And then we go through this and we're like, no, why? You know? But ultimately what we're looking to do is increase the energetic accessibility through the crown, through the pineal. And oftentimes people are so in their head, and the soul comes usually out of the top of the head, and it looks like a little spritz of mist. It's just like, psh, you know. And then the consciousness of that person is usually met by some family members that have crossed over, religious archetypes, pets. And there was always like a family reunion going on up in the corner of the ceiling, usually up in the right-hand corner for whatever reason.
Hi, this is Akanksshaa. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. If you resonate with me, please like, comment, and share. Welcome to Multidimensional Soul Podcast and a Talk Show. On this show, we have with us today Sara Grace, who is a psychic paramedic, medical intuitive, and a psychic surgeon from the US. A very warm welcome, Sara, on Multidimensional Soul Talk Show and Podcast. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello to everybody watching and listening. Thank you for being here.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did your psychic abilities develop? Did you have to go through any awakening, the dark night of the soul, or was it something that you had right from the childhood?
It's been a long road, girl. It's been a very intense journey. And from the place that I'm in now, looking back, it all makes sense. But when we're going through it and having uncertainty and fear and shadow and all the things that come along with growth and evolution, it can be a lot, right? So my experience started when I was 7. And one day I woke up and I could see auras around people. And that's how the journey began for me. I grew up in a very small town in the Midwest in South Dakota before there was internet. So I couldn't just Google, why do I see dead people or these other things? And the town that I was in and the family dynamic that I was in, very isolated, and the family dynamics were very violent and unstable. So I didn't have safety in the family structure. And then all of a sudden I can see, and then I could feel feelings, and then I could hear thoughts, and I knew people's intentions, and then I could see disease in their bodies. This is over a course of a couple of weeks to months. And I'm just a little kid who doesn't know any different. So I thought it was normal at the time. And I was just waiting for it to go away. But it didn't go away. And then I finally asked a family member, and they did the shaming and condemning. Like, don't talk about that. We're going to send you away. And so at 7 years old, when you're told there's something wrong, not to talk about it, I really remember as pivotal, because I developed tremendous fear. I thought something was mentally wrong with me. And I thought that that was very formed toxic shame that then shaped the next 20 plus years of my life. I didn't want to have all of the stimulus and awareness. I felt victimized by it. I just wanted it to go away for the longest time. And I didn't have, again, the safety, the support, or any sort of understanding, or anybody who could be like, oh, it's okay. this is what this is. You're fine. Like, I didn't have that back then. And so for me, I went through the violence through high school, very extreme. And then when I finally got away from that, I was still trying to find a sense of safety, belonging, and I was trying to make the abilities go away. So I started to numb out through addiction, through drugs and alcohol, and just wild behavior, because I was doing everything possible to just have a sense of normalcy, or just try to like belong, just like anybody. But it ended up I had an overdose and a near-death experience, and that really began the process of me going through what I needed to go through in order to understand my abilities. Obviously, I chose to come back after my near-death experience, and I essentially, from that moment, realized that I had to take responsibility for my life and for everything that had happened to me in terms of what I was going to do about it. So I didn't like the stimulus. I didn't want that, but I had to accept that it was part of my life and is current day still part of my life. I didn't want the family dynamics and the violence and all of that. But I had to look at what I was doing to myself as a result, right? We kind of keep the trauma going because from woundedness, or from fear, or from I was angry, I was really angry for a long time. And I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that. Like their life didn't pan out how they wanted, or they didn't, and it's like, what do we do with that? And so that really marked the beginning of my evolution, where I started to clean myself up, kicked all my addictions, eventually became a paramedic. And then the energies just started working through me on calls. So here I am, and I wasn't out. I was still closeted. I finally fit in like a socially accepted position, and I didn't want to be the weird girl who, sees dead people. But fast forward, and for 15 years, I was able to use those abilities in very powerful ways in people's worst moments, like literally as they're dying. And that allowed me to go from victimized to like, wow, this is a gift. I can use this to really help people.
Wow, that's really powerful. And you actually transformed all of your pain into something really powerful here. Can you, yeah, can you talk a little bit about your near-death experience? You said you chose to come back. So were you given a choice, and did you see anything on the other side? Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. Yeah, in a near-death experience, it's essentially just like taking off a heavy coat. And consciousness goes, my experience anyway, was very much yummy, warm, kind of honey, pink-like energy with fractals and mandalas, overwhelming love and nurturing. And I was coming from, a very dark, addicted place. And so I was like, yes, I'm done with that. Get me out of there. No more. And I remember floating in this kind of love bubble, being relieved, feeling a sense of acceptance that I had never felt before. And then I heard a female voice, and she was familiar, but I couldn't say like, this is who it is. So it could have been my higher self, could have been a guide. And she was very eloquent, but she was pretty much like, yeah, you're not done. And I'm floating there in bliss. And I was like, yeah, screw that. I'm done. I'm not going back. I don't want any part of that. And her message for me was essentially, we understand it's hard. You picked a hard journey. But if you go back, you're actually going to be able to help a lot of people understand their sensitivities. And from that place, in a near-death experience, or when people have traumatic experiences or spiritual experiences where they go into a higher state of consciousness, what happens is we can like see everything at the same time, right? Like everything just makes sense. And so I had this understanding of like, oh, right. oh yeah, like I'll go back and it's all just going to make sense and I'll totally do it. Sure. And so then I obviously, and she said, choose now or you're not going to be able to go back. So I made the choice to come back. But the funny thing is from the business where everything makes sense back into the linear structure of the human reality, I was thinking they were just going to tell me how to do it, and that wasn't the case. I still had to come back. And then I was smack dab back where I was with the addictive stuff and all the stuff. And I really had to take stock of what my behaviors were, what I was doing to continue that trauma in my own life, what I was doing to avoid my abilities, how I felt about my abilities. And so that was the turning point where I was like, okay, like obviously I chose to come back. Nobody's coming to do it for me. Nobody's coming to save me, right? So many people just want that. They're like, maybe they've had a hard life and they're angry or bitter or they have a chip on their shoulder. It's understandable, right? But there may be a sense of entitlement. I had a sense of entitlement of like, well, I deserve somebody should come in and do this for me. I deserve an easy life. I deserve help because it was hard for me, right? And we can see how in one arena that could be true, but that doesn't serve becoming empowered, right? So I had to get over myself a bit, and I had to really be willing to be like, okay, like I could stomp around if I want to, but the reality is that my everyday experience is full-blown sensory. I have so much input coming in all the time. It's up to me to handle that, to navigate that. Like I can whine and stomp around and feel victimized by it, or I can be like, okay, this is how it is for me. What am I going to do about it and with it, right? And so ultimately, and it wasn't easy, and it took years of personal accountability, willingness to change behaviors, willingness to let go of people, places, and circumstances that didn't serve me, willingness to go to new experiences and places so that the energy could open and the journey could continue.
So you talked about getting a higher perspective and then choosing to come back. And then after coming here, you realize that the mess is still there and then you had to take accountability. What is it, that one thing that if you were to share with our audience, that the decision to come back, you chose to come back, what was that one thing that you distinctly remember that helped you make that decision and come back over here?
That I was shown that I would be able to help a lot of people make sense of their intuitive and psychic abilities, their energetic abilities. That made it more accessible to me because it turned it from something that was bad and done to me to an act of service and to a Dharma. And so when I saw that I can actually help a lot of people with this, that's why.
Amazing. And you talked about Dharma. And many times when we suffer in this life, it's because of karma from other lifetimes. So were you shown anything about other lifetimes, like whether there were soul contracts to be born in this family, in such a dysfunctional family and violent kind of childhood? Were there any soul contracts, or you chose it so that you could actually serve in a better way?
Yeah, both. I didn't see in that particular near-death experience, but in my own healing and shadow integration, trauma integration, I did a lot of shamanism, plant medicine ceremonies, and I had a lot of kind of vision quest experiences. So in those, I was shown the pre-birth contracts, how it all plays out together. And it's funny because we're all down for it before we come in and then we forget. And then we go through this and we're like, no, why? And it doesn't really help when somebody's down having a super hard time. It doesn't help to say, well, you chose this. That doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
Because it's all about, yes, we can have that awareness, but what do we need to do now, right? To assist self and other people to navigate the dynamics that we're facing.
Wow. Okay. You talked about pre-birth contracts and choosing to do that. And when we come here, we have amnesia. So, what would be a good way to understand this bigger picture? Because people keep suffering in a kind of cyclical manner, and they forget who they are at the higher self level. They forget that they chose this before coming here to earth. So how do you recommend that you remember what we came here for? What are the soul contracts? What do you suggest that we can do for that?
So it's two-part. The human paradigm or experience is designed in the way that we are to forget, because the whole point is for us to feel like we're separate and we have choice and we get to like be in the sandbox and create whatever, right? And we're always higher consciousness in infinite forms, right? And we get to have this tiny little human experience for the briefest moment. It seems like forever, especially when you're going through a bunch of stuff that's not fun. But in the grand scheme, it's just a flash. And so understanding that it's part of the wiring of the human condition, the gravity, duality, the senses, the ego, all of those things construct the human paradigm. So, okay, cool, right? And in order to remember and access higher consciousness, we can meditate. We can do breath work. That's a really good way to open up. We can work with Kundalini energies, root and life force energies. We can do any of the myriad of plant medicines. Any of these types of things can consciously invoke higher awareness. And those are all beautiful tools. We often hear people who have gone through very traumatic experiences also have a heightened, state for that moment where everything slows down and they're like, whoa, they see outside of this. But we're not wishing trauma on people for awakening. It happens a lot, but there's other ways in. You can do some yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong and it can be easier, And so there's a lot of ways in. But ultimately, what we're looking to do is increase the energetic accessibility through the crown, through the pineal. And oftentimes people are so in their head and they're in their own stuff down here that they're disconnected. So first things, breath. Are you even breathing? We got to if we breathe and we take full deep breaths, it starts to open up the channels, right? Another is movement. So if you're really stuck and you're just down in and you totally feel cut off, just introducing breath, conscious breath for a few minutes a day and moving your body can really start to open that. And then we can play with these other experiences and it gets bigger and bigger from there.
Yeah. As a paramedic, how have your intuitive gifts and psychic abilities helped you help the patients?
I always had a leg up because I knew what was coming. It wasn't anything I was trying to do at the time, but I became the paramedic who was always there for death and the worst of all calls. And to us, we're wired in a certain way. The severe violence and chaos of my upbringing primed my nervous system perfectly to become a person who can go into chaos and make sense of it, right? Because I'm so familiar with that. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. So we run towards what everybody else is running away from. And then my experience in terms of the energetics, I knew what was happening. I knew what was going to happen. I could see people's death process. And this was a really beautiful thing because I was able to watch the chakras release, and it looks like a ribbon unfurling from the root all the way up out the crown. And the soul comes usually out of the top of the head, and it looks like a little spritz of mist. It's just like, psh, And then the consciousness of that person is usually met by some family members that have crossed over, religious archetypes, pets. And there was always like a family reunion going on up in the corner of the ceiling, usually up in the right-hand corner for whatever reason. But I watched that over and over and over, and I started to notice the organization of death. I started to notice that there's nothing to fear in death. And I started to notice you're never, ever alone. I never once saw, and I saw a lot of death. I never once saw somebody not be greeted by someone or something.
The fear of death is the biggest fear amongst everybody. So, what can you tell people how to get rid of that fear, or at least reduce that fear of death?
Realizing that death is as natural as birth, and it's 100% inevitable for all of us. So we as a society and the human mind itself doesn't like to think of itself ending because it can't control and it doesn't know. So it wants to feel that sense of power and control. Because there's that unknown, a lot of people fear it. So we don't talk about it and we hide it away, oftentimes, at least in Western culture, very much. But understanding there's nothing to fear, it's very natural, and it's essentially literally like taking off a heavy coat. So even in a painful death experience, people are like, well, will it hurt? Maybe briefly, but ultimately it's like taking off this heavy coat and you yourself are still intact. Your consciousness, your remembrances, your experiences, it remains intact as consciousness, as energy, without the pain, without the heaviness, without the density. And then you're reunited with loved ones and friends and pets and religious, whatever archetypes you're into. And so it's actually a celebratory thing. And so many people fear death, but what they're even more scared of is life. It's living. And they spend so much time being scared of death or so much time being scared of getting hurt or getting sick that they never live. And when you're with people who are dying consistently, you get the honor of listening to them and witnessing them as they reflect on what they did in their lives. And most of them were like, lamenting about the fact that, oh, I wish I would have taken more time with the stuff that mattered, right? And people are always chasing the money or the prestige or the accomplishments or the acknowledgments or the stuff or the whatever. But when we get to the deathbed experience, that's you crossing a portal. And most of the people that I experienced and I got to kind of midwife, that's what I was doing, was kind of midwifing there. A lot of them were really reflecting on that of like, wow, I just wish I would have been more present. I just wish I would have enjoyed it, And so that was really a beautiful takeaway.
You shared about at the time of death, a spirit team and your loved ones from the other side gathering there. So, have you actually seen them with your eyes, or you feel them, or how is all these people, the patients, talk about them? How is it exactly? And can you share any stories, particular stories that are really memorable for you?
Oh, yeah. So with my clairvoyant vision, which is my strength, I was able to see the spirits. And so in the person who's dying, say they're in a hospice situation, their body's in bed and it's taking maybe days or weeks. Well, the veil is thinning. We hear that. But what does that mean? What that means is that essentially the filters that are in place to keep the construct are beginning to crack and open. So the energy that's always around everyone starts to come through. So the people that are in their bed, they begin to see visions of we hear about this all the time, right? Well, this is what it is, and this is why. And they can also start to astral travel, and they can go visit loved ones in different locations. And then at the moments of death, the spirit or the soul goes out the crown, up the chakras and out the crown. And I would watch with the clairvoyant vision this reunion. And that's in a medical death. In a traumatic death, it's a bit different. So because you didn't expect it. So everybody thinks they have time. And that's again why I really advocate, just please live your life right now. Do it today. Say the words, tell the person, take the trip, burn the candles, use the nice, plates. Like, you live your life now, because none of us knows. And there may come a time where, there's car accident, or there's, who knows in today's world. Well, what that person's experiencing, you're in your body driving your car, then you're hit, and the soul is knocked out of the body. And the soul is confused. So as a paramedic, I would see the soul standing next to the crumpled car and the dead body inside the car. And the person was looking at their body, like trying to make sense of it. So I would come on scene, and my clairvoyant, they could tell. And I believe it's in the same way that spirits can tell who mediums are. It's almost like there's a portal open. But the person who had just died could tell that I could see them. And I started kind of developing this protocol of, hey, you're dead, you're in a car accident, we're going to pull you out, we're going to start CPR. So I'm communicating to the soul as we're working on the body. And then ultimately on trauma calls, when the person was ready to transition, an angel or a celestial would appear. And so I would watch this, and I watched this repeatedly. And I cannot tell you how beautiful. Now, an angel doesn't look, to me anyway, like a winged creature with long blonde hair. It didn't. It's consciousness, it's a vibration, and it's nurturing, and it's love. And so it would start kind of like little lights or fireflies, and it would form into this being, very androgynous, with just kind of the framework. But it was resonating, just this pure love and calm. And then the person who had just died traumatically would notice it, obviously, and then go into an embrace, and they would disappear. And that's how I knew that that person had officially died. We were doing CPR, but that they weren't coming back. Yeah.
Wow. You mentioned about religious archetypes coming there over and above the family or the soul family that is there on the other side. So can you talk a little bit about religious archetypes? Because I have seen and heard atheists being met by Jesus, which is like completely outside their belief system. And some people can see religious archetypes from different religions. So what has been your experience? Who all you have seen, and how is it orchestrated?
That's a great question. And what I noticed most commonly is that whatever the person's belief structure is the archetype that presented. And to your point, though, I've also spoken with atheists and people who were staunch, right? And whether it was Christ vibration or some other deity, or even just consciousness and information in the way of fractals and things, they come back like, whoa, just kidding, I was wrong, right? So we as humans, we like to put things in boxes, and we want it to make sense. And we want to be able to have our checklist and be like, okay, well, this is what happens, right? But energy doesn't work like that. And the quantum doesn't work like that. So it's not necessarily organized. So it could be that what is a religious archetype? What is it? It's consciousness, it's frequency, and it presents itself in a way as a messenger, right? And so it's not necessarily that there's like a man as Christ. It's a consciousness and a vibration. And so my understanding to what your question is that what we're being shown is consciousness, and then it's up to us as the individuals to take away any sort of messages. If we see Ganesha, for instance, right, remover of obstacles, there's things that we can take away and then implement into our lives as tools. And so I think that it's not linear, even though we want it to be like, well, you believed this, so it should be that. It doesn't present like that necessarily. Most of the time, yes, but we can't contain the quantum. So it's all consciousness coming in, and it's essentially going to be open to your interpretation of the message.
Yeah. If you connect with different religious archetypes, and I do connect across religions, I'm close to many of them, and I feel their presence. So the way I understand the difference is their essence and their presence, which is distinctly different for each archetype, even though we all are one consciousness ultimately. So
Beautiful.
there are a lot of misconceptions, and in India, it's still there, majority, that after a loved one crosses over, it's not good to connect with that soul. And here there is a belief that if you connect with them means you're disturbing them, you're disturbing their onward journey. Like each soul has a journey, right? And there are different realms that they go to. So what is your understanding? What can you tell people? And many times when the death is traumatic, people worry what is happening with the soul of their loved one. So what's your experience? Because you have seen so many deaths and you have talked to the spirits, the spirit team who comes at the time of death. So huge experience. So can you tell about that?
Yeah, well, I honor, each culture has different belief structures, and I honor everybody where they're at with things. And again, it goes into it's not linear. So when we disembody, we're taking off limitation and understanding that, yes, we may go into a reunion space with friends or family or pets or whatever. And then we'll go into a life review process. And then from there, you may rest for. So those realms that you were talking about, kind of having that understanding. But it's a very natural progression. And there isn't, in my awareness, anything that humans can really do to mess that up, because it's kind of a divinely orchestrated thing, right? Like, I can't even tell you the number of times that I watched the chakras, and sometimes it was fast and sometimes it was slow as the soul left the body, but it was precise. And it was organized to the point that I was like, this is higher. This is coming from a divinely orchestrated event. And it's the same with death. So even if someone dies traumatically, they might be confused. But ultimately, you're never alone. There will be other spirit guides that come in, and or people that work with assisting in souls crossing over, right? And so there's a lot of things to that element of it, but nothing to fear. We can't mess up their journey because it's a lot bigger and divinely orchestrated. And then ultimately, even in suicides or traumatic deaths, ultimately every soul integrates and crosses.
When the soul leaves the body, you talked about the ribbon, and then that we have seen, as per the Vedic scriptures, is Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna nadis, and then the prana moves like that. But as per Vedic scriptures, also the exit from where the soul will exit the body depends on how evolved the soul is. The soul is more evolved and the soul will exit from the crown, otherwise, it will exit from the lower centers. So, have you seen anything like that, or you've always seen the crown chakra exit?
Well, there was a couple of times they came out the chest.
Okay.
But aside from that, it was 90+% out the crown. It looked like a water gun, like just shoots out the crown. So I'm not sure about that history or whatever. And again, I honor my personal lived experiences that most of the time it comes out the crown.
Yeah, sure, sure. And you talked about realms, and even in traumatic experiences, there is a soul's journey which is already divinely orchestrated. So, can you talk a little bit about realms? I understand there is purgatory or bardo in case of traumatic death, and there are healing chambers. So, have you experienced or seen any of this?
Yes, my understanding, and I've seen it's almost the healing chambers after a traumatic death is almost like being put in an ICU until the soul can come to terms with and accept and understand that it died and it's not embodied anymore. So that's going to be one. I also understand people talk about past lives a lot, but it's not past, everything is now. And this is where the mind doesn't like, because again, we like the structure and we want to be able to make it make sense. But when we look at the infinite number of dimensions, trillions of dimensions happening simultaneously, thousands of lives happening right now. And people can't like, no, it's past, like, and it's coming. But again, it's all now. And so, yeah, there's so many realms and dimensions. And I think that people tend to get earth focused and like, oh, I just keep coming back here. Yeah, that may be true. And we're also living in all of these other different places too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you talk about your multidimensional experience? What all star systems you are there, because everything happens at the same time. At the quantum level, there's no space-time construct, and everything is happening in the now moment. So, have you seen any of your lifetimes in other galaxies and other star systems? Can you talk a little bit about your other lifetimes?
I do remember other lifetimes, and I think a lot of us visit in when we're dreaming, when we're sleeping. If you've ever had that, sometimes you wake up and like, oh, I've been there before, right? Like, that feels really familiar, whether it's another family or another like lived experience. And so I have a lot of other, just like everybody does, and a lot of them don't make sense with words, because if we're talking about dimensions that have like this one has two, and then people talk about ascending to the fifth dimension, right? But there's ones with like 33. It gets really too much. So you can't really put words to it. And for me, what I like to do is I like to be aware. Yes, I have the awareness of all of those parallel lives. But what am I doing here right now? Right? How can I take all of my awareness and all of my personal power right here, right now? Because sometimes I'll see people say, like, I can't heal here because of that. Now, there may be a thread of truth to that, but that externalizes your power, right? And so there's ways to learn to become really powerful in your energy field here. And that's what I teach now. So, ways to become very powerful here. And then we have the acceptance and awareness of these other lives, but we get to choose whether or not and how much we want to interact or engage. So, I'm aware, and again, through meditation, through breath work, through Tantra, through Kundalini, through plant medicines, through shamanism, I've done all the things and looked at all of these lives. But then I'm like, well, how does that help me here? What am I doing here? Right. And so ultimately, I choose to be like, okay, yes, I'm aware that I'm this infinitely powerful, multidimensional being, but I still got to do my laundry, like we still have to like do the normal human stuff. And so understanding how to regulate the system here and become powerful and really feel good. Like, oh my goodness, if you're healthy and you're happy in today's world, you are like such a rebel, right? And you're holding down such a unique frequency in today's culture where it's almost like The norm is to be sick. The norm is to be scared. The norm is, so that's really, to answer your question, I'm aware of all of that, but I bring it down and lock it in here.
Beautiful. Obviously, yes. We have to embody that frequency. That's why we are here, to create that new earth with embodying that higher vibration here in this world. Thank you for watching and listening in wherever you are in the world. As Ramdas says, that we all are just walking each other home. So thank you for co-creating the new earth along with me and our guests. And if you resonate with me, do subscribe to my channel and do let us know how you find our episodes. Thank you so much. Lots of love.